the Vistula Canal. At over a kilometre long, the new channel now allows Polish ships to avoid passing through the Russian Straits. It's a $450 million construction project that Russia really wasn't happy about.
Located along the Baltic coastline of Poland, this small 1-mile-long canal has become a thorn in Russia's side. This is the Vistula Spit Canal. While it may seem just a small waterway, Poland poured hundreds of millions of dollars into this project. All to escape from a geopolitical dependence that had threatened the nation's maritime sovereignty for decades. Join us as we find out how this small stretch of water ended up being one of the most genius geopolitical moves in history. The Vistula Spit. Located off the coast of Poland, the Vistula Spit is a strange yet iconic geographical feature. It is an Aeolian sand spit that forms over time when sediments gather in one spot, creating land. This land is further shaped by the air, giving it its unique shape with migrating dunes and sand plains. At its widest, the Vistula Spit is only 1.1 mile wide. While that isn't much, the length of the Vistula Spit is far more impressive at 43 miles long. Now you may be wondering, why is this little line on the map so important? Well, the Vistula Spit is actually a natural barrier. It separated the Vistula Lagoon from the Baltic Sea. And in February 2019, Poland undertook a very expensive mega-project aimed at creating a channel through this natural barrier for ships to pass through by building a canal straight through it. Spanning 5,039 feet long, it was designed to be a marvel of modern engineering once completed. Ships up to 330 feet could pass through it, bringing through cargo and passengers. A lock mechanism would be built in, like in the Panama Canal, to raise and lower water levels within the canal. It wasn't just the canal, though. The project also included the construction of bridges, roads, and even an artificial island. The scope of the project was truly massive. And to foot its bill, Poland has to allocate an equally massive budget. The country spent 992 million zloty completing this project. That comes to nearly 450 million US dollars in today's money. Now here is the weird part. If you look at the map closely, you will see that a natural opening in the Vistula Spit already exists near the Strait of Baltic. This natural canal is perfectly usable for even larger ships than the artificial canal can fit. So why did Poland go through so much effort and spend so much money building this inferior canal? Well, the answer is simple. It was a matter of survival. Born of necessity. Before Poland constructed the Vistula Spit Canal, it was facing a very serious problem. On the northern shore of Poland is a port city named Elbląg. It is a very historic city dating back to the 13th century. More importantly, it is a major industrial hub and a very important port, an essential component in the northern maritime trade in and out of Poland. The problem is that the port is located in the Vistula Lagoon. Historically, trade ships coming in and out would have to go through the natural opening in the Vistula Spit. But today that same system doesn't work so efficiently. And the reason why involves Russia. You see, while the southwestern portion of the Vistula Spit is part of Poland, the northeastern portion of it, right near where the natural opening is located, is a Russian enclave. While it shares no land border with Russia, it still falls under Russian authority, making it the westernmost geographical point of Russia. Since the enclave is part of Russia, that makes the waters near it also Russian territory. That includes the sole natural opening in the Vistula Spit. Here is how this has been very bad news for Poland. Every ship leaving from Elbląg has to navigate through Russian territorial waters to reach the open seas. And Russia isn't exactly hospitable about it. It uses the natural choke point like a strategic pressure point. Whenever Russia wants, it can stop Polish ships from passing through. Or they can slow down the passage through bureaucracy and administrative delays. Whenever Russian ships are performing military exercises, it's an instant block on passage as well. Because of this, Poland's very important port and industrial hub became a slave to Russia's whims. Poland could either continue putting up with an unfriendly neighbor holding the keys to the ocean, or it could break through the door barring its way. The government chose the latter. The proposed canal essentially bypassed Russian control completely, creating a route for Polish ships directly to the open ocean. But undertaking such a massive mega project out in the sea wasn't easy. Excavating a new river. Before any of the construction process could take place, engineers first had to clear the site where the canal and all its encompassing structure would be built. But this was easier said than done. The Vistula Spit isn't some barren strip of land. It is a thriving ecological zone with a dense forest dominating the landscape. And for the canal, a portion of that forest had to go. But that had to be done while ensuring minimal impact on the local ecology and environment. The workers couldn't do a simple land clearing. They had to comply with the legal limits of the environmental framework strictly enforced in Poland. Woodcutting was completely restricted during the nesting periods of the local birds to ensure they weren't disturbed. Plus, they had to ensure no animals were harmed during the process. Once the tree felling process was finished while adhering to these guidelines, the logging and branches removal phase began. The process took several months. Finally, in October 2019, the site was handed over to the contractors for the actual construction to begin. First came the excavation process. Bulldozers were brought in on the spit and began digging a 1.2 miles long stretch for the canal. From one end of the Vistula Spit to the other, a straight line was dug deep enough for ships to pass through. The sheer amount of land dug up is mind-boggling. A little less than 145 million cubic feet of earth was dug up, loaded into dump trucks, and moved. Of that, a large section was formed from the canal, but also from the surrounding infrastructure that the contractors had planned. With the main excavation completed, the land was ready to be built upon. But there was one thing that could undo all that progress if a solution wasn't implemented fast. The breakwaters. While an excavation stays pretty much untouched on land, the same is not true for excavations near the sea, especially on a spit that is formed from silt and sand accumulating in one spot. This sand and silt could come back in just a matter of days, undoing all the hard work that had been done. The area most prone to this risk was the entrance and exit of the canal. Waves carrying soil hit these areas first, blocking them off extremely fast. How do you protect against waves in the middle of the ocean? Engineers had a brilliant plan. They created what is known as breakwaters. These artificial coastal structures act like a wall. They are designed to intercept waves before they reach the shore. The waves hit these structures and have their energy reduced or completely eliminated. But making these was no walk in the park. The work began with driving steel sheet piles directly into the seabed near the base of the planned breakwaters. These piles were essentially steel walls made to give support to the breakwater and act as the base, a metal skeleton on which the breakwater can be built. With the skeleton installed, rocks were arranged in a mound over it. But this structure was still too weak to bear the brunt of waves hitting it day and night. A layer of armor was needed, especially designed to break the powers of waves in the most efficient way possible. 10,000 concrete blocks with an irregular pattern were installed, interlocking with each other like Legos. Their irregular design dispersed the force from the waves, significantly reducing the amount of sand and silt reaching the canal entrances behind. The eastern breakwater was designed to be longer compared to the western one since it curved to close the gap, ensuring the minimal amount of waves entered within. While all this was being done, the engineers were also busy ensuring the canal's inner excavation would not cave in on itself. The slopes near the canal's edges were reinforced with topsoil to ensure there wasn't any erosion and to stabilize the banks. The infrastructure for the canal itself was built, and by all accounts, it was capable of being navigated by ships. Only there was one huge problem still needing addressing. Gates in the sea. Like any major canal, the Vistula Spit Canal also needed locks. But why? The answer lies in the water levels of the two water bodies that the canal connects. The Gulf of Gdansk and the Vistula Lagoon have different water levels, creating an uneven water surface height on each side of the canal. Plus, the tidal waves make it so that the difference is ever-changing during the day. For ships, this difference in water level can be deadly. Without a stable water level, the ship runs the risk of beaching or being damaged. And when even a single ship gets stuck in a canal, it spells a very bad time for the trade route. However, the lock has an even bigger role to play in a canal than simply being a blockade. The lock acts as an elevator at sea. It is used to raise and lower the water levels within the canal to match the side from which the ship is exiting or entering. This way, a ship can smoothly transition from one elevation to another. Plus, an open canal will have the water constantly flooding from the higher elevation side into the other, which the lock doors stop. This helps prevent extreme or sudden salinity changes in the surroundings that can be quite dangerous for the wildlife, flora, and fauna. Now, while big canals like the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal can have a very large number of locks to navigate the extreme height changes the ship goes through while passing, the system for the Vistula Spit Canal is rather simple, only employing one main lock. To construct this lock, engineers first used steel sheet pile walls driven into the ground to create a watertight dam. The dam encompassed the area where the lock was to be built, and water was removed from within it. While this structure was only temporary, it still needed to be effective. If any water came in during the construction process, it could put the workers in danger or damage the lock. To ensure there was no water ingress, a tightness cover was also installed underneath. Within this temporary dam, engineers installed 4 massive lock gates in pairs of 2, each weighing 160 tons. The lock doors move on rails driven by hydraulics, opening and closing slowly, but with extreme force capable of resisting the strong water currents created during the process. With the doors built, the canal was essentially completed. Ships could now pass through the Vistula Spit without having to worry about paying a toll to the Russians or being blocked off. Here is what it looked like when a ship passed through. As the vessel approaches, it gets into position in the canal behind the first lock gate. The gate opens, and the ship enters with the lock closing again behind it. Next, the valves open up. Powerful pumps start pushing in water to raise the water levels. The ship floating on the surface also gets raised up. This process continues until the water level within the canal is equal to the other side. Finally, the second lock door opens, and the ship can sail out to the sea. While the canal was now fully functional, there was still a lot of work to be done before it could open to the public. The floating bridges. Spit project wasn't limited to the canal. An essential part of it is to allow road vehicles to pass over the canal. The Vistula Spit is uninhabited. It is home to villages and towns. There are roads connecting these communities to the mainland that simply couldn't be circumvented to make way for the canal. After all, the canal cuts straight through the entire width of the Vistula Spit. The big question was, how do we connect these roads over the canal without hindering the ships? A simple bridge was completely out of the question. It would have to be built far too high to ensure passing ships wouldn't collide with it. The alternative? Swing bridge. Not one but 2, one on each side of the lock. These bridges facilitate cars to travel over the canal easily, and when a ship needs to pass through, they swing out of the way to make way. The perfect compromise. Though there is a hidden genius that may not be immediately apparent. The reason why the engineers chose to build 2 bridges isn't because the traffic was too high. Rather, they both work alternatively. When a ship comes, one of the bridges closes, but the other one opens up. Once the ship reaches the other bridge, the first one opens up once again, ensuring the traffic never stops. The swing angle on the bridges is 90 degrees, which makes it so they completely retract. And this motion is facilitated using heavy counterweights exceeding 500 tons. With a span of 203 feet, they are among the longest of their kind in Poland. A fine example of modern engineering. However, they aren't the only impressive feat accomplished with this mega project. After all, the engineers also built a new island. Remember all that soil dug up while creating the canal? Well, Poland didn't let it go to waste. Rather, it was used in the most intuitive way possible. While initially all the excavated soil was piled up on the Vistula Spit, it soon began to be carried out on ships to the ocean, not to be dumped, but to create something amazing. First, sheet pile walls were installed on the ocean floor to create a skeleton, much like the breakwaters, only on a much larger scale. Then the sand and soil were poured in. As the sand began piling up, the sheet piling was cut down into sections. Soon enough, an island began emerging on the horizon. Called the Astian Island and spanning 180 hectares, this was not an accident. It was a part of the Vistula Spit Canal from the very beginning. But not to serve humans. It was designed as a habitat for the wildlife. Birds that used the Vistula Spit as their nesting place could now utilize this island as an alternative to the area taken up by the canal, ecology being compensated for the industrial intrusion. While all this was happening, there was another important phase of the project underway within the lagoon. Lagoons, as a general rule, tend not to be too deep. This makes them sometimes dangerous and inhospitable to larger ships that ride low in the sea due to their weight. And since the point of this whole project was to facilitate and improve access to the Elblag port, something had to be done about the Vistula Lagoon. Dredgers were deployed along the main routes leading from the canal to the port. These massive machines worked tirelessly to dig up the seabed to increase depth. And these efforts, while time-consuming, paid off. The initial depth of the lagoon was a mere 8 feet. After the dredging, that depth was doubled to over 16 feet. Now, much larger cargo ships can navigate the waters without having to worry about beaching or getting stuck. The soil dug up during the process was also used in the construction of the Astian Island. Though that doesn't mean the dredgers can go to rest. The waves in the lagoon carry sand to the lagoon with every wave. This buildup is slow, but without proper maintenance, it can undo all the work in a few decades. The same is true for the canal and its surroundings. The entrances can get blocked off by the buildup of sand over time. Dredgers have to be deployed consistently to deal with this, to ensure the canal and the access to the port remain usable. Cutting the ribbon. With the bridges, the canal, and the island constructed, the project entered its testing phase. Every aspect was rigorously stressed and tested for failure. The canal had ships pass through it, and the bridges were overloaded beyond the average weight they would be facing during normal use. Once the engineers were sure everything was up to par, the canal finally opened for use on 17 September 2022. But that isn't just a random date. It was actually the anniversary of the Soviet Union's invasion of Poland in 1939, which led to the country's occupation by the invading forces. Poland was making a statement. The neighbor that had bullied and controlled their maritime trade for so long now held no sway over it. Poland was finally free. Though this statement was certainly not appreciated by the Russian authorities, according to reports, the Russian media ran story after story criticizing the canal project. They called the canal a direct military threat to Russia, an illegal project under the regulations of the European Union. Poland denied these accusations. But seeing as they came before and during the Ukraine invasion, the pressure these claims exerted was quite real. However, one point raised by the Russian media holds quite true. They claimed that the canal would not be profitable in any way. And well, they are not wrong. Only 12 medium-sized ships can go through the canal in a day. That certainly isn't a lot, so the economic gains are very low. So low, in fact, that according to some sources, it would take 650 years for the canal to start generating profit, having covered its construction cost. But that's the thing. The Vistula Spit Canal project wasn't made to make money. While economic gains were a significant catalyst to its construction, the real point of the project was to break free of Russian control. The canal accomplishes that goal very well, though that isn't the only benefit it presents. Why it matters. Aside from the sovereignty from Russia, the Vistula Spit Canal is vital to Poland's economy in many ways. First of all, it creates a much more efficient route for ships to reach the Elblag port. The old route the ships had to take, going through the Russian territory, was 62 miles longer than this new route through the canal. It didn't just save time, which in itself saved money, but it also saved fuel. The shipping costs reduced as a result, indirectly supporting the economy. Then there is the accompanying development that comes with the Elblag port becoming more viable. The canal has made Elblag a far more strategically important port than it used to be, and as a result, Poland suddenly has a lot more incentive to invest in it. The port facilities are expected to be upgraded over the next few years. Millions of dollars are expected to be invested in the coming years to further modernize the local industry and develop the region. There is also the whole tourism boom going on due to the Vistula Lagoon suddenly being far more accessible. The lagoon is a gorgeous place by all rights, but due to the limited access, tourists and yacht owners would generally avoid it. Now that access is easy, that will not be the case anymore, though a hidden objective behind this mega-project may have been hinted at by Russia. While Poland denies it, the Russian accusation that the new canal has military significance might not be too far off the mark. Technically speaking, the canal could allow NATO warships to enter the lagoon without needing Russia's permission. Moscow has painted this potential scenario as a huge threat to its security. And there is a kernel of truth to it. If NATO wants to put pressure on Russia for some reason in the future, parking warships here would not be a bad idea. Poland would be far more defended than it was before. Though was that the real motivation behind the construction of the canal? No one can say. The bad side. The Vistula Spit Canal isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Experts have raised some serious concerns about its construction with far-reaching consequences. The Vistula Lagoon may look beautiful, but its unique hue is actually partially a result of pollution. For decades, Elblag has poured out industrial wastewater, sewage, and agricultural runoff into the lagoon. As a result, a large amount of phosphorus has settled at the bottom of the lagoon, acting as a nutrient-rich surplus diet for the blue-green algae. The abnormal abundance of this algae as a result is what gives the lagoon its color. This algae found within the lagoon is not the same as the one found naturally in the ocean. It is far more toxic than its natural counterparts. Now, in the past, the lagoon was basically cut off from the rest of the ocean except for the small opening that Russia controlled. But with the canal, concerns were raised that the distinctive strain of the algae could get out in the ocean in large quantities, replacing the naturally occurring variant. This more toxic version could have severe effects on marine life and could cause irreparable ecological damage. A 2023 study showed that while the algae is really dangerous for the ecology, the construction of the canal is not a significant enough disturbance to cause its widespread distribution. At the same time, the canal could potentially cause it to spread more locally, which would be bad for the region's marine environment. With that, we are done for today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.